YouTube here. Welcome to Mindful Live number 42. Is it Mindful Live 42? It is Monday, the 21st of February, and welcome. It's nice to have all of you here. It's nice to have you here. Let's get into the stories of the evening that we're speaking about. As usual, I'm going to start off speaking about the general idea about what I spoke about in the contemplation today, where we spoke about the measures being eased up. It seems to me all around the world, when you look, it seems like the pandemic, as some people are saying, the pandemic is going into the endemic, as in this virus is now going to be something that we have to become accustomed to. We have to live with, and that's that. That's what it is becoming. And we're seeing that all around the world. In the United Kingdom, we're seeing they're throwing down some of their measures, but down here, we're seeing some measures being relaxed also. As someone stated previously, we're seeing that the beaches and rivers, the curfews have been removed, but not to be mistaken with all the measures have not been removed. You still cannot go down to the beaches and rivers and have your usual lime. That is not what they're saying. It's just no longer there's a curfew. So basically, you could do that same go take a nice calm dip, but at any hour in the night. Good night, Schizo. Greetings. All right. So they have dropped the age also for not dropped the age, but they have dropped the requirement for the under 12s. And this was necessary for multiple reasons. Safe zones now accessible to children under 12. Starting Monday, which is today, children under 12 will now have outlets to release and relax. The Minister of Health on Saturday announced that unvaccinated children under 12 can now access safe zone establishments, which is great, I think. which is great, I think. I think they've been doing some of those. They've been doing some of those children, some of those juniors, a real injustice, I think. It was a real injustice where they were locking them into these homes indoors. They couldn't go anywhere. And I think personally, generally speaking, children probably need more entertainment than the adults out there. And the children had very few outlets. Well, at least very few of the usual modern society outlets. They didn't have access to those. They had to go back and tap into the old time days if they had that they could have tapped into, and that's what they had to go with. But now, gratefully, they have lifted that and this problem, I don't even understand why this was here in the first place, because long time ago it was known that the under 12 children are not at a particular risk, and they don't spread it even as easily as adults do. So this could have been done a long time ago. I don't think that prohibiting under 12 children from accessing safe zones was helping Trinidad any great amount at any point in time. I don't think there was even once a point in time when this was something that really helped Trinidad. And the thing is, the under 12 age group, the children, where do you think these children would have been going? It's not like they would have gotten access to the bars anyway. It's not like children are the frequenters of the bars and those pub style restaurants where you would get the crowd. No, that's not where the children go anyway. So that wasn't even something that you were saving us from. You wasn't saving us from the fet atmosphere with all those under 12 children getting in on the fetting action. No, that wasn't what was being saved from. So I don't think that the measure ever had a real good benefit to it. And I think it's really unfortunate when we look at so many measures, pleasant night anti-do. I think it's so unfortunate when we look at so many of the measures in this pandemic, and it seems like quite a few of them, we could say the same thing about it. It seems like the measure didn't have a lot of positive benefit, and it seems like we could have seen that it would not have had a lot of positive benefit from the very beginning, yet still it was done. I spoke about this one, was it 2 weeks ago, where I highlighted the cremation issue, where the scientific resource, the scientific paper that our government cited for their reason for prohibiting the public cremations, outdoor cremations of COVID people, was false. It was evident that they could not have read that paper and then came to the same conclusion, because we read through piece of the paper, quite a bit of the paper, and you can find that back on Mindful Live. This is a good time to plug the YouTube channel, Nathan Springer, over on YouTube. If you ever missed bits of the live or you want to catch up what we speak about on previous nights, you could go back there. All of the other Mindful Lives are over on my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer, over on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe over there, drop a like if you are listening right now, because right now it is streaming live over on YouTube, of course on Instagram and TikTok. Also, make sure to hit that like button once you're inside of the chat. If you're over on YouTube, do the same thing. Drop a comment if you have something to say also. But as usual, if you miss any pieces, you can go over to my YouTube channel and be sure to subscribe and catch them there. Also, the Mindful t-shirts and the Mindful hats are always available. DM me for an order if you are so interested. Good night, Tico Lewis. Good night, Super Mario. Good night, good night, good night. All but Mindful Live 20. Yes, you are correct, Roni. Wow. You're keeping up. You're keeping up. Yes, that one, the audio gave some problems. So, yes. So, as I was saying, I think this prohibition of the under 12s from the safe zone wasn't a good idea in the first place. And it wasn't something that could not have been solved way earlier on. But now that they are doing it, I find it strange that they have specified the under 12s, but they have not allowed the over 12s to under 18s. That age group, that teenage age group, they aren't allowed in the safe zones now. And tell me this, if you think about this. Yes, SK Nate, we basically now start. Gibran asks over on Instagram, countries are starting to lift bans all over. How far behind do you think Trinidad's response is? Trinidad seems to usually be somewhere around 3 weeks behind most of the other countries. That seems to be the general modus operandi we are going along with. But part of the problem is that we are self-confessed, being pegged to the WHO measures. We're following what the WHO says. And the WHO, being a scientific organization, they almost always lean towards a little more safety than a more pragmatic view would. So when I go read an article covering what is going on over in the United Kingdom, and we'd cover some of that eventually. But yes. So when you allow these, tell me, what do you think is going to happen if you allow these under 12s to be able to access the safe zones? So let's say I am 16 years old, and now my 10-year-old sibling can go access whatever safe zones they're going to access. I'm guessing quite a few of these other establishments are now going to reopen. They can go access it, but I cannot, because I am not vaccinated and I am not under 12. So tell me, what are you going to encourage that age group to do? And okay, is it something that you think is really a necessary encouragement? Okay, I understand if you might say that, yes, for some people in that age group, yes, it would make sense to be vaccinated. I am not debating that. I am not arguing whether it would make sense for some in that age group to be vaccinated. Okay, fine. Good night, positive radiation. But at the same time, do you think that, okay, while it may make sense, do you think it's something that should be given that level of coercion effort on it, where you bear in mind there would be some parents, and I'm aware of some parents. I believe I asked this question in one of the contemplations before and in one of the lives, and many parents said it. There are numerous parents where the parents would be vaccinated, but they have no interest in vaccinating their teenage children because they've read some things that make it pretty clear it's not as dangerous and as crucial an emergency for certain age groups, which is okay, fine, and your prerogative as a parent. But now, what do you think is going to happen when they turn on that screw? So that under 12 age group can go out there and have fun. You who are unvaccinated as a teenage child have to remain there. And then Someone in the chat, Ria, says it makes no sense. But tell me if it makes no sense still. Does it make no sense when we add it to the fact that schools' vaccination drive begins on Monday, today, the same day that the under 12s are being allowed, back to go into safe zones? Richard Glubman says it makes sense if you're trying to get 12 and over to get vaxxed. And that is true. It does make sense that way. That way, it makes complete sense. You add it up, and it's pretty clear of a picture to me right there. Because, and not just when we say over 12s, it makes sense if you're trying to get over 12s, but under 18s, that's secondary school age vaccinated. Because very few things you do now, I think, very few things that you do now would get adults who didn't want to get vaccinated would automatically just change their mind. I don't think there could be many more pressure campaigns that would pressure unvaccinated adults into becoming vaccinated. If you're doing a pressure campaign now, I think it's just too late. It's not going to happen. But a pressure campaign on teenagers. I hope, Gibran says, I hope you use that term scientific loosely. Why is anyone still following the fluctuating mandates of the corrupt WHO? I use the scientific term loosely when I refer to the WHO. The WHO is not primarily science. They're science with a heavy serving of politics. Are these vaccination drives being accompanied by medical examinations pre and post-vax? I highly doubt it. And that's the thing. If you're going into these schools and encouraging these teenagers to get vaccinated, are you giving them follow-up with it? The Ministry of Health will be rolling out COVID-19 vaccination at schools from February 21st to 25th for students, teachers, and parents. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Roshan Parasram said on Saturday at the virtual health briefing, other vaccinations that were necessary for students would be available at health centers. The program continues to be in place for all other vaccinations through the local health centers. There are some outreach programs through the school health program for other vaccinations, for example, yellow fever, yada, yada, yada. Now, they said already with this that this has to be approved by the parents. They're not bypassing the parents. It must be given with permission from the parents. And I believe I saw in another article that they said the parents actually have to be there in person for this to happen. But what do you think? Oi, interesting. What's up? What do you think is going to happen when you tell teenagers in the country that you cannot enter safe zones, and then at the same time, simultaneously, you start a vaccination drive inside of the schools? That is going to put pressure on them. And without a doubt, that seems pretty clear to me. You are going to pressure quite a few young people into getting vaccinated, which I guess if that's the end you're looking to get, okay, that's the end you're looking to get. But personally to me, at this stage in the pandemic, I don't mind using encouragement, informing people. In fact, the vaccination drive in the schools by itself may be a grand thing. I'm all about getting the vaccine to South Trini 26 in mass for those who need it and for those who so want it. I am also all about giving people the freedom to choose. Especially when we can look at this point in the pandemic and see that the vaccines do help, but the vaccines obviously are not the ticket out of this pandemic. That seems pretty obvious by now. The vaccines are not. As they were billed, plenty of people billed them as being the ticket out of the pandemic. The vaccines are. And okay, I understand that was the early when we didn't have all of the science down concrete. Granted, but now it's become pretty clear that the vaccines were not the way out of the pandemic. They were the way for protecting yourself, and especially in a country like Trinidad where you have nationalized health care, that does make quite a bit of sense. I always like to put that caveat. Like many people in Trinidad, when they look sometimes at foreign news sources, they sometimes argue from a foreign point of view. If you are arguing from a freedom point of view, I understand that. I love freedom too. But bear in mind, in Trinidad and Tobago, there's a nationalized healthcare, which means we are all tied together in this system. And then that leads towards where you could be blamed when you make some unhealthy decisions. You can be blamed for the entire thing. I'm all about answering the question of people who are scared of taking the vaccine. Okay, granted. Well, we could speak about that after South Trini. That's not a problem. I'd enjoy hearing what you have to say on that after also. But let's look at the United Kingdom and what they are doing. While these measures seem to be leaning towards pressuring the teenagers. Good night, Saifuddin. While these measures seem to be pressuring the teens toward getting vaccinated, let's see what the United Kingdom is doing over there. UK. People with COVID in England won't need to self-isolate. People with COVID-19 won't be legally required to self-isolate in England starting in the coming week, the UK government has announced as part of a plan for living with COVID that is likely to see testing for the coronavirus scaled back. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said ending all of the legal restrictions brought in to curb the spread of the virus will let the people in the United Kingdom protect ourselves without restricting our freedoms. He is expected to lay out details of the plan in Parliament on Monday. So UK is lifting all of their legal requirements that were put in, legal restrictions that were put in place to battle COVID. All of them. Good evening, Scafty. And this I think is a good place to look at because the United Kingdom also has a nationalized healthcare service. So it's a better proxy. Now, obviously, their wealth level, the level of resource access that they have isn't close to ours. It isn't comparable really and truly in that sense, but it is comparable in the sense of nationalized healthcare. And he looking for political points, Richard Globman says, and I kind of agree. I think part of the decision over in the United Kingdom has to do with politics. Anybody who pays a little attention to news and followed up with the bacchanal where you were seeing the United Kingdom, the mark was being busted that they were partying while restrictions were in place in 2020, I believe, in the height of the pandemic, they were out there partying. So yeah, it's after the party some of that fell, and I believe that is true. And even over in the United States, while some of these states over in the United States are seeing some of their highest numbers, they're removing some of their restrictions because they've noticed the polling numbers are saying that, all right, people are moving away from favorably viewing COVID restrictions, so politicians are pulling back from it. And what I would like to take this moment to highlight is the fact that politicians use quite a few different factors to weigh into their decisions. So, do you really think at the very beginning, when they were obeying the science, that the only criteria they had in mind was the science? Do you think that, hi, good night, Spectrum, welcome over there. If anyone is looking for a good time to go and get some paintball shooting done, go view some Spectrum over there and visit them. Really nice. Yeah. Do you think that when they were first making these decisions and they were saying they were obeying the science, do you think that the only thing they had in mind back then was the science? And do you think that it should even be that way? Do you think that it should even be that the only consideration is just the science? Boris Johnson said, I'm not saying that we should throw caution to the winds, but now is the moment for everybody to get their confidence back. We've reached a stage where we think you can shift balance away from state mandate, away from banning certain courses of actions, compelling certain courses of action in favor of encouraging personal responsibility. Personally, you see that sentence there, I fully agree. I've been saying this for quite some time because here's the reality. He's saying that he believes they reached a stage where they have to shift away from the state mandate side and shift to the personal responsibility and encouraging people down that avenue. Here's the thing. I think there was never a point in time when the state mandate side would have even worked. Good night, Central Chow Master. I don't think there was even a point in time where the state mandate side of things would have ever even worked. There was never a point in time when the state could have mandated something and forced everyone to do it and was sure that everyone would have obeyed it. Gibran says they criticized the freedom in Florida and then went on vacation there. Yeah, I noted that and I found that very interesting also. Yeah, the thing is, we've seen it over here. Just because the state says to do something, that doesn't mean that people do it. You see, at the end of the day, whether the state mandates something or not, it's still up to personal responsibility. It's up to the person's responsibility, the personal responsibility of a person, and their choice to obey what the state says. Any way you take it, regardless of how you look at it, it's up to personal responsibility. That's why I was saying from the very beginning that probably a better idea would have been that we lean into personal responsibility and push people towards that avenue before we reach to this point. People were saying that personal responsibility cannot take us out of this pandemic. People don't have the responsibility to do things, so we cannot do this. Okay, all right. Granted, I understand. You don't have the trust in people having personal responsibility. I don't really have much trust in that either. I don't really have much trust in everyone's personal responsibility either. It's just I realize that it's the only choice we have. There's no other choice. You see, state mandating something and forcing it to happen never really actually makes it happen. That's not how it happens. How it happens either way is getting the personal responsibility. So, yeah. The legal requirement to isolate for at least 5 days after a positive COVID-19 test will be replaced with advisory measures, and the coronavirus will be treated more like the flu as it becomes endemic. The new plan foresees vaccines and treatments, keeping the virus in check though the government said surveillance systems and contingency measures will be retained. If COVID will not suddenly disappear, and we need to learn to live with this virus and continue to protect ourselves without restricting our freedoms. But scientists stress that much remains unknown about the virus and future variants that may be more severe than the currently dominant Omicron strain. The scientists went on to basically say that they don't really go along with this idea, and it's not the first time I've seen that. I believe when I read over in Barbados, some of the measures Barbados was taking that didn't go along with what the WHO recommended. Some of the scientists over there were saying some of the same things. They were speaking of the worry that they have. But here's the thing. I agree that the scientists may have this worry, and that may be their jobs, and understandable. Tell us about this worry. My problem from the very jump was the fact that it seemed like we weren't looking at this in a multivariate enough analysis. So we were looking at it from the science from one angle. Okay, this virus and the virus is dangerous, and whatever we must do, the most serious thing that we have to do in order to stop this. Okay, understandable. Understandable. But there are other factors that we must pay attention to. Also, why aren't we hearing more about the vaccines Cuba made to compare it? I don't know. The Cuban vaccines, I saw it. I saw they were on the market. I saw Cuba was giving it out. You know, as you said that, I think I'm going to take a bit of a dive into that whole Cuba business to see what's going on with that. That might be a bit of an interesting thing to find out right now. Yeah, I think that would be interesting. But yes, as I was saying, I think the multivariate analysis was needed. So it wasn't just the science, it wasn't just the health experts. You also needed the economists in there, the psychologists. You needed varying people to tell you about the varied effects these measures would have on your society. Because I think some of these measures that we are seeing, we are only now getting to see a glimpse of it. We are only now getting to see a glimpse of it. There's an article I saw here, and it basically reflected what I see many different places when they speak about this pandemic and the effect it's had on many children out there. A cry for help. Children's Authority sees increase in challenging behavior. During the pandemic, the Children's Authority has noticed an increase in the number of children displaying challenging behavior who need more supervision than parents or guardians can handle. And that specific children displaying challenging behavior is it's something with an actual legal definition. So in June 2021, the Children's Authority, it restructured its programming and engaged the Child Justice Unit in dealing with and responding to children in need of supervision, previously referred to as beyond control children. So previously they referred to these children as beyond control children. Now they changed the name to children in need of supervision. For obvious reasons, the name changed because it was recognized they are children who would require a lot more supervision and assistance, as opposed to terming them beyond control. And usually I find the whole name game, the whole word game that people play with a lot of these things, I find those word games oftentimes unnecessary. But I think in this case, I understand. I understand. Calling children beyond control children versus referring to them as children in need of supervision, I think one paints a much better picture. Much better picture. Because they can be controlled, it's just that they have to be provided with the proper support and interventions. Keisha Mitchell-Daly, manager of the Child Justice Unit, said the organization gets reports of children displaying challenging behavior through its registry unit. Through the registry unit, the authority will be providing assistance without the intervention of the court. We try to encourage parents and families to focus. She explained that children in need of supervision are categorized by the court. So even if a child displays the behaviors listed above, they would not be categorized as such unless a parent or guardian applies to the courts for assistance and the court deems the children in need of supervision and orders particular services from the Children's Authority. So what this is saying is, according to the court, this means that people are bringing children in front of the court to decide this. That the court is now seeing more and more children deemed children in need of more supervision. She said from May 18, 2015 to August 31st, 2021, the authority received about 30,000 cases, of which 5.9% were children in need of supervision. She added that from October 2018 to October 2019, 37% of cases were reported for substance abuse, 25% for aggressive behavior such as bullying, intimidation, and verbal fights, 36% were involved in physical fights, and 10% were involved in gang activities. She stressed that the numbers are not a full representation of what is actually happening in the country as many cases are not reported. As such, we haven't seen a spike of applications for children in need of supervision. Rather, we've seen a spike in risk factors and the conditions through which the cases are coming to the attention of the court. Yeah, so they are seeing that increase, and I have no doubt with that. That increase will be something you're seeing. I think if you're just paying attention in Trinidad, if you're paying attention and you're looking around, you would see, at least to me, it seems pretty obvious, especially in certain less fortunate neighborhoods, that you would more regularly these days see children, young people, school age, just walking around idly by, finding anything to do with their time because they have nothing better to do with their time. So these are some of the factors. While some people may have been screaming about the health and the science, and listen to the science and listen to the health, and we must lock down the country, etc., underserviced communities. I like that term. I'd use that term instead. While some people were saying such things, some of these problems were not being looked at. What would happen if you throw a spoke in the wheel of the entire system, and the children that were being carried on the backs, a lot of children were being carried on the backs of the system. Their parents weren't really paying much attention. And what would happen if now you throw a spoke in that wheel, the system comes to a grinding halt, and all these children are thrown back into the responsibility of parents who weren't accustomed to that in the first place? What would happen? What really do we expect to happen? She added that during the pandemic, the authority has seen an increase in placement breakdowns, where the individual or facility with which the child was placed could no longer keep the child because of their behavior. There was also an increase in the resurfacing of old applications that were dormant and on their way to being closed. This one, when I read this one, it kind of hurt. Honestly, this kind of hurt. There was also an increase in the resurfacing of old applications that were dormant and on their way to being closed. In these cases, the child had already gone through treatment and placement and was doing well, but the child relapsed and was once again presented to the court or the authority. So, in this pandemic, something that was noticed in this pandemic was an increase in the resurfacing of old applications. So children who were once thought to have, they were on the mend, they were doing better, they were in a good place. But for many people who work in these areas, and I know usually there are some people in social service that are sometimes in the live, I'm sure they would be able to testify to this. Many people who are on the mend in that kind of way, especially children, something that they thrive on is schedule. They need that schedule, that rhythm, that repetitive regime. So if they got that at one point in time, okay, they had that, you wake up, you go to this school, you meet this teacher is seeking your interest, then you get home, you are currently placed with this group of people, you have a limited time there, then you have to go and sleep tonight to wake up again to do the entire thing again. All right, great. And you were doing good, you were seeing the progress, you were swimming, you were starting to see above the waves, you lost the numbers of your old friends, and etc. You didn't need the streets because you were in school. You don't need the help of the streets because all the time you needed was being spent in school or on some other kind of extracurricular school related activity. But then pandemic hits, bam, school stops. Wherever you are placed, you have to try to spend all the time there. that place very likely would not have been engineered with the intention of holding you 24 hours for a day. So you don't feel comfortable to stay there. You want to go to walk. You want to leave there. You have to get out somewhere. Back on the streets. Back with the same old friends that had you in the trouble before. And it's the same thing with the friends. As is often said, sometimes when people are talking about bad company and they hooked up with bad company and this person met bad company and they spent too much time with bad company, sometimes everyone in the group is equally bad company. They're just bad company for each other. So when they link up with each other, that's when the bad company comes through. So easy to see how relapses occur. And to think that just this fault in the system, this falter in the system could be at cause for relapses like this. Children who may have their life, they may have been at the proverbial fork in the road in their life, and they chose the beneficial lane. They were going down that lane, but then barriers came to that road and helped encourage them back onto the other one. That's very unfortunate. Marlon Bascom, Acting Manager, Investigation and Intervention, Unit North and East Zones, agreed the pandemic has exacerbated the psychosocial factors in homes. However, he said children's challenging behavior could be a symptom of a greater problem. As such, he explained when the authority gets a report through the registry unit, the staff conduct a psychosocial investigation to identify the root of the issue. Some of the children with mental health issues are assessed by the children's ward at St. Anne's. He said the most common issues are conduct disorders, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and attempted self-harm. Also, most of the children undergoing drug treatment were ages 14 to 17. Many were lower socio-economic groups, hotspot communities, and get this, 80% were male. After determining the source of the problem, the caseworker will develop a case plan to guide the initial intervention. The intervention may take the form of psychological support in terms of seeing a therapist, etc., 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 etc. If there is need for financial assistance, we will be reaching out to the Ministry of Social Development, etc. So, vast majority of those cases are young men. Vast majority of those cases are young men in hotspot communities, as they are termed, from lower socioeconomic groups. So if you have these young men growing up in this horrific situation, in this nightmarish situation, what do you expect to happen? And then if the pandemic comes and exacerbates these issues, is there really any surprise if we see the crime rate spiking now that we're reaching the end of this pandemic? Is that really a surprise? Ha! 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 Someone in the live is speaking about mandatory vasectomies for men. I think that is ridiculous. And pretty sure it would be violating several different human rights charters. Doesn't matter that it's reversible. Mandatory? No. That's just not how it works. There could be... No. We'd entertain that talk some other time, maybe. Maybe at the end, we'd go through some of this. Now, some of the interesting things in this that I've noticed is something I read not too long ago, where they established, a study was done, extra cash for low-income mothers may influence baby brains. New research suggests giving extra cash to low-income mothers can change infants' baby brains development. I mean, it's very obvious, but the thing about this study that I found so interesting was they brought it down to science, where they literally saw that with basically each extra bit of money given to low-income mothers, they found that the brain development of their children increased with each incremental increase in money that they got. And Now, when you compound, so if you're thinking about that, more money in lower income environments cause better brain development in the children there. Now, what do you think would happen in a pandemic if, now added to all of these other things that we found out, we now realize that all of these lower socioeconomic groups are going to get less and less money? Are going to get are going to get less and less money. Someone in the live says that low income people are very fertile. Okay, that could seem a bit a bit insensitive, but I understand what you're saying. But fertile isn't necessarily a good thing if you end up in the problem where these many children end up becoming and suffering with social issues. Then they become a problem for everyone. These are issues that everyone faces. We live in the same society here. So low income people, what they do eventually has an effect on you too. So it makes sense that even when you're making decisions, you have them in mind. You have them in mind. All right. The final topic: our grandparents weren't rich and the old people made plenty children. All right. Just to speak about that as you are so Cup says that it is unfair to taxpayers. We shouldn't pay child support for slack people, both male and female. We should have a policy on low income, 2 children max. Listen, I don't think some of you realize the authoritarianism that you are asking for. It's lovely to say things like, okay, we should make sure that men don't have any children before they're married. It's lovely to say that out there. It's lovely to say that we should make sure low income families only have 2 children. Okay, fine. It's lovely to say those things. But you have to get to the point where the rubber meets the road. That's the point you kind of have to reach to and figure out how exactly is such a thing going to be executed. How are you going to make sure that low income families only have 2 children? And Ria, I think that argument doesn't stand up. I think that is a straw man argument from some feminists that we only pay attention to body sanctity when it comes to men bodies, and when people recommend forced infertility on men, then is when we pay attention to body sanctity. No. People talk about genital mutilation constantly, only when it speaks about FGM. FGM is an issue, a world issue. Is there an MGM? No. So let's ease on that, I think. Let's ease on that. I think I know why you're saying that too, and I know usually where those arguments lead. But yeah, it's nice to say it would be preferable if, ideally, it would be preferable if low-income families had less children. That would be preferable even for them. But how do you make sure such a thing happens? And how do you make sure such a thing happens, Ria, in 15 minutes? How do you make sure such a thing happens in a humane way? Who is going down to low-income families to make sure and supervise and make sure they only have 2 children? Who is going to tie a low-income family's and a low-income mother's womb and make sure that she cannot have any more? Like, really, who is going to do such a thing? These things reach to really poor parts of human rights very quickly. They speed up to that point, actually. Yes, you reach to that kind of Chinese point real quick. And what ends up happening almost all of the time is that the person who pushes the idea, maybe the person who put forward the idea had a good beneficial plan in mind. They were kind, and they were that real kind dictator that would have done it really well. But the reality is, when you give the leadership the authority to do that, you aren't the leader. You're just giving them the authority to do it, but You aren't actually the leader, so you won't be able to control what happens there. You aren't the politician in place there. Yes. So you're going to allow Dr. Rowley now to make that decision. And thank you. I'd prefer not to. All right. I was going on into another story, but I think I will leave it there for tonight. This was nice. To you over on Instagram and YouTube, I hope you were informed, educated, or entertained, and I will see you again tomorrow for the next Mindful Live starting around 9:30 p.m. I'll see you then. And but I will be on TikTok for a little while longer, hanging out. If you would like to come see, there's someone there who seems very interested in having a discussion, so we will have that discussion over there also. Tune in if you'd like.